Hey everybody, my name is Vanessa Wheeler. I also go by VAVÁ in my recording projects. I'm a singer, I'm a songwriter, I produce, I play guitar, I love gear, effects pedals, and the like. Major into experimentation, and I'm very interested in sharing that information with you today. So I am excited to make this my first foray into consistent YouTube content. If you follow me on Instagram at VAVÁ and Vivo, you know that I've been developing my skills as a songwriter and generally as a guitar player for a few years now, so this seems like the perfect platform to begin to execute and display my proclivities towards production and composition as well. So I'm very excited to share with you the new KGB Fuzz by VALCO effects, in which I put fuzz on literally everything in a track, guitars, bass, drums, and synthesizers, in an effort to warm up the track, give it some character, and essentially learn, experiment. What does it sound like with synthesizer and fuzz? We may have many recordings, but until you actually put your hands on the thing and experiment with these different timbres, you don't really have the essence of that experience. So hopefully this is a good translation for you. Anyway, let's dig into that. Alright, so I added the KGB onto my track. I started with a drum loop that I got from Ian Masiak. He goes by Ian Hits Drums on Instagram. Check him out. He has a Patreon, which you can find the link in his bio, and he develops these like really insane, sometimes like really active, complicated tracks. If you subscribe to his Patreon, but he also includes the stems, so as you'll see here, I can chop them all up, and I've added the KGB onto the drums, I've added it to the synth. So now we're sitting here in my track. We've got different groups, guitars, drums, etc. Let's take a look first at what Ian was up to. I decided to chop this thing up and layer it all over the place. So that was my initial inspiration. The next inspiration, of course, was the KGB and like how to get it into the track with guitars. But before anything, I had this down and I just layered some synthesizers. So without getting too deep, I used a really basic inspiration, a pad. And then, with that, I started to mess around with bass sounds. Let's listen to the original bass sound. There's a lot of modulation going on. It's a very active bass sound, and it's non-threatening. And I wanted something to cut through the mix. So I'll show you later how I use the KGB to do that. And in the guitars, this is where the KGB started to give me my inspiration for how I was going to build this track. When you put something like that and add reverb and what have you, along with the synthesizer, it really emphasizes the pad sound. And what's really special about fuzz, just across the board, but on guitar in particular, is the decay, the way it peters out. So what's really special about this sound is how it sits in a mix. A lot of fuzz sounds can be voluminous in a really vertical way and take up a lot of space timbrally within a track. It has a lot of highs, it has a lot of lows, and then there's a ton of mids, and it's very muddy. With the KGB, you have 4 different voice settings. You have something that's more full, I wouldn't say like big muff style necessarily. And then the thing that's really special about fuzz is that, especially here with the splat setting, is that it gives a very particular quality to the decay of the guitar that you don't get with another kind of instrument. It's just deliciously unpredictable, and it's really touch responsive, especially at 1 meg on the ohm setting. You still hear quite a lot of the original signal because I have the blend knob in the middle, but every attack kind of blooms. That was my initial sequence of events. The splat being the real indicator. I'm calling it splat, being the indicator of like where am I gonna, or the impetus about where I'm gonna take this track. Next I layered in a guitar lead line, which I think ended up kind of sounding like a 90s cop drama. And what's really interesting about the sound is that I'm still on setting number 2, but the ohm setting is all the way down. The blend is still in the middle, but the fuzz is cranked. It's just more direct. When you crank the fuzz, you're just going to get more pointedness to your tone. Okay, so with that I added in a synth line. Now we can start to sort of compare the original sounds, how they were kind of anemic initially and how they were transformed. With the effect on it, you begin to like enter a middle ground between, like, I don't know if that is a guitar. It is still, it tricks you because it is still very nasal. I've got the blend knob cranked, so you're not gonna hear much of that original sound. It elicits the ear a little bit more intrigue, I think. Then we double it with the original line. I have them panned, well, I have them straight up the middle on the track because, again, it gives you a sense of bewilderment, like what exactly am I listening to? Moving on from that, I started to mess around with the bass, and this is where I think I entered the danger zone as far as 90s cop drama. This is the original bass sound. This is with the KGB on it. And the trick here is that, I mean, I do have the blend knob all the way down. There is already a little bit of hair on the sound, and there's so much complexity with the modulation. But I have the output knob completely maxed out, so I'm essentially overdriving extreme modulation. I have it after the modulation, so it's going to get what you're hearing. Because I'm doing it that way, it really requires a maxed out fuzz sound to cut through the track, because the guitars at the end of this, there are quite a lot of layers, and I need it to be a pointed sound. What I do sacrifice is the bottom end of the bass. So I added like sub bass at the end with I think an 808 sub sample. So after I went through and got the general gist of the vibe for this sound, I wanted to create a whole different section that spoke to fuzz as a truly like singing lead instrument, and this is what I came up with. Yeah, it's a very full sound. I have the voice setting on full. The blend knob is in the middle. Again, because the pedal is so touch sensitive, I spent a lot of time just tweaking exactly how I want my guitar to respond to the fuzz. If you want like a mega fuzz sound, you just crank the fuzz knob, and that's what I did here. It's really quite ear-piercing, so having the ohm knob again to be able to set it at lower levels besides whatever I have on my on my instrument, which I believe is 1 meg. It's so bright that bringing it down is a lovely, useful option, especially when recording. And then we have a rhythmic harmony line that I utilize in the beginning of the track. But I've employed a slapback sound to really essentially differentiate between what's going on in the lead and what's going on in the rhythm guitar. I am using the same guitar for all of these, by the way. And what's interesting here is that I have it on setting, or voice setting 3. Voice setting 3 is, I would say, the most splatty of all the settings, but you can't max out the fuzz knob because like the fuzz acts similarly to a bias knob. If you max it out, you're not going to be able to break through unless you have heavy gain in front of that. So I have it at about 10 o'clock, and the ohm knob is at the very bottom, so it's not super, super bright, but it gives it just enough hair around the sound, and it acts a little bit like an overdrive. And that really goes to show the versatility of this pedal. We've gone from splat, and then we have a kind of lead line that's very touch sensitive, and the, you know, kind of stretches out those decays in a really lovely way, to kind of a, you know, soaring lead sound to an overdriven sound. And here at the end, I wanted to add just a harmony to the lead sound. It's like a harmonic, it's like a really rich harmonic sandwich that, you know, I'm just playing whatever feels good. I don't know if it is technically right, but as far as harmony is concerned. So again, there's like a lot of dissonance happening because of the non-harmonic chord tones that get accentuated when you use fuzz. That is the grand finale. But alongside that, I'm not just working on the guitars. My process isn't linear in that way. I end up working on a ton of drum sounds. Again, let's listen to the original. And what I end up coming up with is something to this general effect. It's real cute, but it's like anemic. I chopped up everything even further. I added samples, but to a great degree adding fuzz to, let's compare snares. This is a snare that he did. And this is the snare. The way the fuzz allows the decay to close in on itself, it increases the flavor of the dynamic. I know it's extremely nebulous talk, but just listen to it. Versus unaffected. The quality of the attack is there. What the fuzz does is take the air around the sound and expand it and make it more known to the ear that there is a volume around the sound, like an invisible volume to it, which I quite like. So with that, I also added a snare sound, a synth snare, which I also affected. Compared to the original. It's just an overall bigger sound. And And that decay is playing off the original snare decay. It's like a dance. One's going da-na, da-na, and the sound around it, the reverb around it, is also going fuzz. Shh. Maybe that makes sense, maybe it doesn't. And then similarly, I chopped up, I love the quality of the sound of, again, air around something. So I took the hi-hats, which you would hear as, let's say, like that, and I took fuzz plus reverb, great combination, especially anything gated, and is quite delicious. So here's this cute little sound, and then together it's you know, you put that all together with a couple samples, a sub kick. Let's just highlight them all, huh? It's a big sound. So let's take a listen to the entire track. Now please don't fault me for being an experimenter when it comes to music. My own music often plays with different genres, and sometimes it's hit or miss, and I think this one might be a miss, but man, I learned a ton. I highly encourage you to just start messing around. If you don't know what it's going to sound like, even the better. Like, I'm about to put some flange on a drum set. I don't know what that's going to, I have an inkling of what that's going to sound like, and I think it's going to be really useful in certain situations. So let's take a listen to this track with the KGB Fuzz, a really awesome tone sculpting fuzz pedal that looks really cool, and it sounds awesome.